Welcome to another episode of Affinity Talks Gospel Podcast. My name is Graham Nicholls, and I'm pleased to welcome today Wayne Harris from Crossteach. Welcome, Wayne.
Hi, Graham. Great to be with you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself personally, kind of where you are geographically. You don't have to give us our street address, but the town and kind of how you came to be doing what you're doing before we ask you about Crossteach specifically.
Yep. Okay. So a bit about me personally. I live in Kenilworth in the West Midlands. Here with my wife and father of two children, both adults now, one at university, one living at home working. And we're members of Kenilworth Community Church. Yeah. So been in Kenilworth for around about 15 years. So we moved up to this area when I joined Crossteach.
Were you
going back?
Were you from a Christian home?
Originally, me, no.
Right.
Not from a Christian family. And it kind of, I suppose, it's one of those things, I'm not a psychologist, do some pop psychology, but I became a Christian through the witness of school friends. So maybe that informs part of why I feel schools work is such a vital work.
So did you become a Christian actually at school age then, as it were?
Yeah, during sixth form years. Less than a year before I left. So went off to university as a very new Christian, but yeah, just during final time at school, yeah.
Right. That's a really good thing to hear. So you work for an organization called Crossteach. Before you did that, were you a teacher?
Originally, I trained as a secondary maths teacher.
Right.
I did 5 years. Loved working with the young people and that side of teaching, not so much some of the other aspects of teaching. So then did how long was it? Probably about 10 years of various roles within the IT and internet world, including running my own business, running another startup business, but at the same time, still within church, still doing voluntary youth work.
Right.
And just reaching a point of actually my heart is in working with young people. So working through that process, seeing not having any theological training or youth work training, seeing the Crossteach post and being a qualified teacher seemed like a really good fit, and couldn't have been far wrong because 15 years later I'm still here, so probably was a good fit. Yeah.
Brilliant. So introduce us to Crossteach. What do you do?
It's very simple. We are Christian schools work, so we go in schools, teach about the Christian faith. And it's this one thing I'm not sure everyone kind of, when you're in something, you don't always realize how it compares to other things. So in the UK, we are very privileged, I think, as Christians to have opportunities to be in schools. Yeah. Schools have to teach about Christianity. They should be having daily acts of worship that are broadly of a Christian nature. So there are plenty of opportunities for Christians to be in schools, and that's where we are trying to make the most of those opportunities.
Yeah, just on the act of worship, just as a slight sidebar, I was interviewed about this recently on the radio, and because there was some moves afoot to get rid of it, basically. My anecdotal evidence is that it's not really practiced in the way that it should be, but it is still on the statute book, as it were. Is that right?
That would be our experience, particularly in secondary schools. A number of primary schools, I think, still practice them, particularly obviously church schools, even church secondary schools. But I would say secondary schools, it's very rare to find something that would resemble some kind of act, what we might call an act of worship. Yeah. They might still have assemblies where notices are given and they're told off for messing around on the bus, that kind of thing. But
and is that supposed to be every day?
They should still be every day, not necessarily the whole school together every day. Right. So some schools may do something within a tutor time, a registration period, where there might be a thought for the day, that kind of thing.
Right.
So they vary in how they look, but there should be something every day.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I'm pretty sure it's not practiced. So why is an organization like yours needed? Why can't churches just do that? Or why aren't churches just doing that? Because it seems like an obvious thing for churches to be doing if there are those kind of opportunities.
And lots of churches are doing that, which is great. Yeah. I think so. Some of it is about obviously capacity to have some. We have in the 4 areas where we work. roughly the equivalent to full-time people. Sometimes it's a mix of part-time, but roughly the equivalent to full-time who are dedicated to this. Not many churches have that capacity. But also it's then within a shared resource for all the churches in a local area. So rather than each church having to find somebody within their congregation, we provide those specialist skills to a group of churches in a local area.
Yeah.
And our experience is, in reality, lots of churches have relationships with primary schools, and they feel very comfortable doing that. They seem to feel less comfortable with secondary schools. And obviously something like an RE lesson, if you're teaching at GCSE and A-level standard, there is a bit more rigor in the curriculum and what you're expected to teach. So having qualified teachers, we think, adds something churches may not have within their congregations.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. It's a specialism, so it's not so much that the churches are necessarily doing it, but they may not have the skill set or the confidence. And you may, I suppose, in some cases, be a pump primer, perhaps. I don't know, where you get it going, and then churches can carry on, sort of thing.
Yeah, we have that. We've done a lot of work to try, even areas where we don't, we're trying to encourage churches just beyond our reach, where we could provide people with resources and a bit of training to get them started. And certainly the churches we partner with, we're always encouraging them to think, what more could they be doing with local schools beyond what Crossteach are doing? To kind of, we've got the door open and we've got a foot in where they're doing some things, but what more could they be doing to build on that?
Yeah. So I don't know whether it's more than 3, but there's RE style lessons, there's assemblies, and then there's kind of Christian clubs. Are they the main areas?
They're the main things. We then also would have a full strand that we call experiences, but particularly around festivals, Christmas and Easter time.
Okay, right.
And they're just slightly different. Generally, they're more interactive. They'll be done in kind of a format with zones, people dressing up a little bit more into. Often a church would host that as well, so it feels different.
Mm-hmm.
But around Christmas, some schools still would do a carol service,
right,
or Christmas service in a local church, and we would be part of that in partnership with the church.
Okay. Now, just to drill back on those other 3, RE lessons, what opportunities are there for those? Or maybe it's got another term for it. I don't know. But are there real opportunities in many schools for that?
Pretty much every school. There are ways schools can opt out of some of these things. Generally, they're required to, but the vast majority of schools, there's a requirement for them to be teaching RE.
Right.
Or they might call it RS or philosophy, but that kind of topic.
Mm-hmm.
And the requirements are that should always include Christianity.
Right.
So almost 100% of schools should be teaching Christianity at some point to all their pupils. So there's a vast amount of opportunity there for us to say to schools, we can add something, we can supplement, kind of enhance something we're doing, not replace all of what they're doing.
Yeah.
But one lesson within a topic, particularly, we may come in and just adding that something as committed Christians trying to live this out. What difference does it make if we add that personal element as well as the delivering the curriculum?
Yeah, no, it sounds really good.
Things like, if you're a non-Christian teacher and people start asking you questions, that can be difficult because you're not quite sure how to answer. You can deliver what's in the textbook or the curriculum, but once the questions go beyond that, so those are the kind of things we add for a school. Yeah.
And the clubs, I was chatting with someone about the Christian clubs yesterday, and it's as in the kind of lunchtime clubs or end of the day clubs, what you might call Christian unions or Christian clubs of some sort. We were just saying that there's a challenge to do with those, that on the one hand, they're quite good for nurturing the Christians and showing them, or the church-based kids anyway, whether they're Christians or not, the God-fearing kids. It is quite good. But on the other hand, it's a bit exclusive, or it's not cool necessarily to go to those clubs. Do you find that at all?
Well, we tend not to call them Christian clubs or Christian unions.
Yes.
And we explicitly say they are for anyone and everyone who would like to come along and find out more about what Christians believe, or if you're already a Christian, to kind of be encouraged in that. So although they're for anyone, everyone, we would always open the Bible We'd always look at some aspects of Christian teaching and try and do that in a way where we can discuss that and they can think about it for themselves. So we intentionally present them as a inclusive, anyone can come. That doesn't make them any cooler than they would otherwise be. And there are still a lot of young people who are Christians who, for multiple reasons, don't always attend. It may clash with other things they want to commit to, or that fear of being known as a Christian can be there as well.
Yeah, we have that in our locality as well. This was part of the discussion. We have our church will be probably typical of many, where there are some young people who are baptized. There's quite a lot who are certainly God-fearing and probably believe, but just, some of them through sports or other interests they have, some of them through that they would say they're a Christian to their friends, but they don't want to make too big a thing of it, make it too public. And it's really hard as an adult, I think, from the outside, where you think this is easy, compared to what you're gonna have to experience in the rest of your life. This is pretty easy, but it's hard to give them that kind of mindset. I don't know if you found any helpful ways of trying to encourage young people in that.
Mostly that would have to be, I think, through churches, parents, youth workers who are seeing them more often, and would want them to encourage them to be a little bit more confident about their faith, a little more, maybe even mission-minded. So we say there are those who reluctant to come, but at the other end, there are those who love coming and will invite their non-Christian friends as a place where they'll be able to come and ask their questions. And one group we've met with recently, who've been meeting after school once a week, and they want to do, we haven't actually decided what we're doing, but they want to do some events, some activities.
Yes.
Where they can actually go out into the school community, let them know who they are, let them know what they believe, and invite them to come along again and have their questions answered, find out more about it. So there are those, there are those who are reluctant, but there are always those who are really active and really keen to witness to their friends. So, the more we can encourage to be like that, the better. Sometimes it is numbers, to be honest. If you feel like you're the only one or one of, and there's only 2 of you, 3, it's hard.
Yes.
So the group who are talking about activities, there's 15 to 20 of them. That you've got the security there in numbers. So sometimes it's a numbers thing as well.
No, again, that would be similar to our experience locally. Actually, there's one school where there is a club of about 25, and there's one that's got about 8 in it, and the 8 one is just a bit creaky, and it's hard to move that on. And there are logistical reasons why it doesn't work very well as well. But it's probably got the same number of Christians in the school. That's the thing. And it's a bigger school, so it probably has more Christians, in fact. So it could, in theory, be bigger if you just took a very simple statistical kind of basis. But it's not. A question popped in my head and then went out again. But what are the barriers to the work that you do?
I think it's really interesting because when we obviously we do lots of church presentations, that kind of thing. I think most Christians we meet assume that our biggest barrier actually is the attitude that schools would have to us as Christians wanting to go in.
Right.
The vast majority of schools are very warm, very welcoming, very appreciative of what we do and what we add to the school life. The greatest barriers to doing what we do are resources, having enough money to our costs go up every year, so constantly having to raise more each year. I would love to see high quality Christian schools work in every school in the country. We're currently operating in 4 parts of the country, so that's a long way from where we are. There are others doing it as well, so it isn't Crossteach wants to take over the world, but there are gaps. But that requires resources of money, partner churches who get the vision, and also people who are suitably qualified and skilled and experienced to join the team.
Right. So the barriers,
the two things that cause us most challenge, and the thing we have to confront most often is fundraising and recruitment.
Right. So that's much more of a barrier than schools being hostile. Right. How do you raise funds for Crossteach?
I'd imagine, like most Christian charities, multiple ways. So the main one where we raise up individual new support is through church presentations, phone groups, prayer meetings, that kind of activity, just sharing about the work, what we do. Partnerships with churches, and so some of those churches would then add to their mission fund, whatever they call that, would donate to our work. And there are some trust funds who would support the kind of work we do, where we would have relationships with them, either on an ongoing basis, or sometimes it's for particular one-off projects, that kind of thing.
If you were talking to a church leadership, what would you tell them was the strategic value? I know that sounds very businessy, but the gospel strategic value. How does it help the gospel? What the work that you do?
I think we need churches to see that we have a mission to reach young people with the gospel. Obviously, the Great Commission includes everyone, so a subset of that is young people. Hopefully that's pretty straightforward. And we walk quite a fine line. So yes, we see our work as part of that mission, but there are restraints around what we can do within an secular educational establishment. So we would explain it as we are really that first line of presenting the Christian faith, giving young people opportunities to come and ask questions and find out more. But then if they want to go beyond that, they've really got to connect with the church. We're not there proselytizing, discipling, those kind of things. There's a limit to our work. So our work is very much the first contact work. We are on the front line in schools where probably 97% or more of those young people have no contact with the church. So if we're not there, how else are they going to meet Christians? How else are they going to have that first point of contact? We would then hope a church would work with us so that any young people who want to go further, want to find out more, want to connect with the Christian community, we've got those partnerships ready to send them on to and direct them to and connect them with. So we're the front line, but it's got to be in partnership with churches, because we are limited in how far we can go. Yeah,
that's really interesting. I mentioned this recent discussion about schools work. It came off the back of there's a book I've written. It's over my left shoulder, and it's called Reasoning in the Public Square. And we were talking about this book with some people in our church, and there's a discussion question at the end of each chapter, and the first chapter has this question: where is your marketplace? And this person said, well, I think schools are a major kind of parallel with the marketplace that Paul goes to, because I explained in the book that it's a place where people meet, where people, in the case of the marketplace, trade happens, but also ideas are exchanged, and culture is formed in a way in the marketplace, and cultural ideas, more than necessarily highfalutin ideas, but just opinions are shared and so on. And this person said, oh, that's really, schools work is like a key marketplace. If you want to reach lots of people who are at a point of exchanging ideas, and where you've got a kind of mix up of people equivalent to more like a marketplace, schools are the place. So I got quite enthusiastic about it in preparation for this discussion today, thinking, that this is an analog of the marketplace for Paul. So I don't know if that kind of resonates, but it kind of worked in my head, because I thought, oh yeah, that's a very good point. Where else do large groups of people gather as adults? There's nowhere really. Whereas in a school, you've got thousands of people often all sort of gathering at this great sort of melting pot.
Yeah. Well, and adults do, but it's in the workplace, which they're there for a particular function. Like you said, in schools, you are educating, you're presenting different ideas, you're encouraging young people to wrestle with those. So it's, and all the evidence is most people make faith decisions before they're 18. The vast majority of Christians will have made a faith decision. So it is a critical point in people's lives when they're forming, like I said, it's culture, it's ideas, questions they've got about religion. That's a time when they're making those key decisions.
Yeah, I mean, and workplace obviously is a massive opportunity, and the book and lots of other initiatives are encouraging finding other marketplaces and so forth. But schools are quite unusual in terms of the quantity of people thrown together, because in a workplace you often don't have classes of 30 people or mixing going on. You may have colleagues around you. You may actually be a bit more isolated now since COVID, because you're doing a bit of working at home as well as in an office, and when you go in the office it's all a bit kind of transitory. So school is the place where relationships are formed. So as well as ideas being formed, there's lots of relationships going on at schools, which can be profitable for the gospel. you probably know more people when you're at school than at any other time in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, it's interesting. My daughter has friends from primary and secondary school and sixth form college that she still connects with. Most of those not Christians, but she still has a contact with them. So, and she is a believer, my daughter. So it's has value and may have longer term value, and then there may be fruit in the long term for that. So yeah. Uh, just a few comments on the sort of state of the culture in schools. I mean, as you say, people say it must be terrible and then hostile, and you're saying, well, that's not the main barrier. But has there been a change in the 15 years in terms of the culture in schools with respect to Christianity or their views of Christianity?
I would say not from. So there's two parts on this. So obviously the school staff, the adults, the leadership.
Yes.
There are still these requirements for things they have to do, and we still are providing a service where we help them do that, hopefully better than they would otherwise do. So
Yes.
they may not be overly enthusiastic about what we're saying and what we believe, but they recognise that we're adding value to what they have to do.
Yes.
So still a willingness to invite us in. Obviously, as long as we're doing it well, doing it professionally, all those kind of things. Particularly RE staff we work with are very enthusiastic and very warm about our work, even those who are not Christians, they see the value of it. So I don't think that's changed a great deal, if I'm honest, over 15 years.
Yep.
I would say amongst the young people, when I first started, the vast majority, when you're when you're in front of 30 teenagers, trying to tell them something about Jesus, most of them would have been indifferent.
Yes.
As in, that's fine, I'm not a Christian, so why do I need to even know this stuff?
Yeah.
I think the majority is still there, but there's a growing minority who are more hostile to what we believe as Christians and the values we have.
Yeah.
And particularly, not surprisingly, I would say around relationships, sexuality. If we're asked to teach about marriage, about relationships, we are prepared for that to be a more difficult series of lessons.
Yes. Yeah, I think that reflects what's happening in wider society. Yeah. People kind of plot, and you can put different time periods on it, but plot a move from, well, Christendom, but more recently, a move from basically Christians being viewed favorably. So basically, we think what they do is good, and we might not believe it, but we think basically they're morally good, through to indifference, through to hostility. And people put different time periods on that, but yeah, that what you're seeing in schools, I think, reflects what Christian sort of sociologists observe in wider society. How do you deal with that hostility? Could you say, we're prepared for that? Is it an intellectual argument, do you think, or is it an emotional argument, or is it an avoidance argument? If you know what I mean.
It's a mix of things. So one thing we've really had to do is work much more closely with the schools to ensure they're aware of what we're going to teach and they're comfortable with that.
Yes.
So that if people's going and complain to their parents, for example, and the parents then phone the school can defend what's been done. So that there's that side of it. We want to make sure the school are happy with what we're doing, therefore they will stand by us and fight our corner if necessary. But in terms of going into the classroom, we've gone through a process. I think we've become much better at being teaching what we're for, rather than getting into arguments about what we're against. And so for example, talking about the Christian view of marriage, one man, one woman for life, as being a fantastic, beautiful gift of God, and being the best you could have, whilst acknowledging, in lots of areas of life we don't always get the best, but that's if God has designed it that way, that must be the best way. And therefore we're for that, rather than coming from we're against anything for the sake of it. We're for something. And then as a team, we just do a lot of work on what kind of questions do we anticipate, how might we answer them well, but also getting better at asking questions back before we give an answer, because often the the intent, the motive behind the questions varies wildly. So trying to understand, is a young person asking me about same-sex marriage, as an example, because they are genuinely interested, because they're trying to work out for themselves, this is different to what I've heard for, how does that inform what I'm thinking? Or are they just trying to point out that we're the bad guys and we're against it? So there's a bit of work to, what is your motive here, therefore how am I going to respond to you before I jump into the response? I think a combination of those things, still we still do get some hostility.
Yeah, and in a way, there's nothing you can do about it if you've tried to say it winsomely and kindly. Can't be responsible entirely for people's response. But I think it is really difficult for us more broadly as Christians to be heard and not to be lost in a kind of a noise of hatred, either hatred against us or a feeling that we are being hateful ourselves. And I think finding ways to be uncompromising but to be kind is a challenge for us. And I think just boldly stating our views doesn't really help, because people who are listening to us have a whole different kind of worldview. So that they're not dealing in the same sort of categories, but either truth categories or authority categories or right and wrong moral categories as we are. So it's finding ways of expressing that we are seeking to be morally good and that we are sensitive and understanding about people with different views. But I think you're absolutely right in talking about the good. I think when I became Christian when I was a late teenager, really, although I had a Christian upbringing. And I think probably as an older teenager and going into marriage, I knew the Bible's teaching on marriage and sexuality, and particularly, I guess in my case as a heterosexual person, on sex outside marriage. But I think I probably thought it was just what God wanted. Whereas I think it was quite a lot later in life when I thought it was good, if you know what I mean by the difference. Because you can be really clear, and I think sometimes teenagers can be really clear. They understand what the Bible's teaching is. That marriage is between a man and a woman, and sex is to be the context of marriage. Most of them by the time they're actually going into secondary school, if they're from Christian homes, know that as a piece of Bible teaching. I think what takes a bit longer for them to learn, and we need to try and put it across, as you say, is that it's actually really good. There are so many goodnesses to that. It's not just an arbitrary rule that God's decided, well, I'm gonna restrict that to this area, even though you could experience it in all these other aspects of your life, but actually we're just going to have it over here. Whereas it's good from many points of view, to do with the individual, but also to do with families and to do with society. So yeah, I really support getting that across as well.
Right. I think it's also worth saying, I think if it gets, it doesn't get confrontational very often anymore, but when it does, it kind of reminding the young people that we're there to teach them about what Christians believe. If we're challenging their thinking, that's one thing, but we're not there to change their thinking necessarily.
No.
And they will learn about other views about these things from other people as well. So the school haven't invited us in to force a view on them or to change their minds about anything. We're there to teach what Christians believe, why we believe it, how that impacts how we live. We're not a political organisation. We're an educational organisation. So usually that's enough to say, okay, I can understand you're just telling what you believe. You're not.
Yeah.
Although they might feel challenged in what they believe, we're not there to force them to change their mind.
No. And I often try and get across to people who might kind of interview me for various reasons about the fact that there's no such thing as a neutral. So it's not as though you can say, well, Christians shouldn't go in and teach that, children should make up their mind themselves or something, or, no one should force religion on them. And you say, well, there's no such thing as a neutral bit of teaching where you don't teach anything, because by teaching nothing, you're teaching that there's nothing else to learn. So you're actually even making a statement by saying there's no such thing as faith, or, there's no such thing as faith you should be interested in. That is a teaching in and of itself. So that's an opinion or forcing on people. So that idea that secularists and, the humanist society sometimes kind of put forward about, we just want a neutral thing. It's okay that people have faith, and they sort of give us a little pat on the head, to say it's okay for you to exist, but you can't try and explain to other people. And I try and say, but by not doing that, you are actually forcing on people a non-Christian view, and a whole kind of moral framework that's related to that. So I think it's good sometimes to remind people of that.
Yeah. Well, I think we're seeing the view from some that we shouldn't bring our faith into our post. Like, what else is going to inform your views about these things if your faith doesn't come into it?
Well, no, yeah. I mean, you got to bring your morality into it, and then you got to root your morality in something. Of course, as Christians, we know that there isn't actually really any moral basis without the authority of God, but people at least got to join it up in some way. And having an opinion that Christianity is bad is a moral view. Which is an authority claim that we can question and hold up to the light. How can people find out more about Crossteach if they're listening and they're just getting to near the end of this podcast and thinking, where can I find out more?
Yeah. Well, we've got a website. It's currently being redeveloped, but there is one there with information about the things we do, how you can contact us, that kind of thing. If you're in one of the areas where we work, so we're in Kent, in the Tunbridge Wells area particularly, Warwickshire around Leamington and Warwick, Nottingham, and London, which is obviously massive. So a team that currently covers Camden, Islington area, but also Tower Hamlets over in the east of London as well. So if you're in one of those areas, I would really encourage you to contact the team, which you can do through the website. They'd love to come to your church or meet up with you and share more about what we do.
And wherever you are, you'd be interested in doing church delegation work?
Part of our redevelopment is on our website to have a library of online resources. So even people beyond those 4 areas can contact us, and we would do whatever we can to support them in schools work, whether that's resources, advice, potentially training, which we've done in the past for churches. Yep. So we really want to see people in schools talking about the Christian faith, and we'll do all we can to make that happen.
I was going to say, it's crossteach.org.
.com.
.com.
We'll probably get you there as well, to be honest, but .com is the main.
Crossteach.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
www.crossteach.com.
Yeah. I don't know why I've got crossteach.org in my head. I should have researched that.
I think we probably have all those domains, so it probably will get you there. But
.com
is the one we use in our. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, anything else you want to particularly mention that needs to be put across?
I suppose back to that question, why schools work. I think there's a lot of conversation that has been for years, and amongst church leaders about the lack of young people in our churches.
Yeah.
And the ongoing decline of young people. The numbers, even those who are already there, a portion of those are leaving. Just to encourage people to think about schools as a place where they can connect with young people. You want to do that sensibly, do it well, but that can be that first contact that might draw those young people then to your church to find out more. So if you're not doing school, if you're in a church in a local area with schools and you're not doing schools work, give it some serious thoughts.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Brilliant note to end on. Wayne, thank you very much.
Brilliant. Good to see you, Graham. Thanks for the time.
Thank you so much for listening to Affinity Talks Gospel Podcast. Affinity is a network of evangelical churches and Christian organizations working together, sharing stories in order to encourage and equip God's people to preach and live the gospel in this generation. If you're interested in supporting this ministry, we'd love you to join us. Just head over to affinity.org.uk/join to find out more. And we look forward to catching up with you on the next episode of Affinity Talks Gospel